This idea of grinding has become a bit of a status signal in the business world. Entrepreneurs brag all the time about how they're working 10 or 12 hours a day, how they locked themselves in a dark room for a year and went monk mode while they built their business. And after actually working with dozens of 6, 7, and even 8-figure entrepreneurs over the past 15 years, I call bullshit. Okay, I call bullshit. Now, I want to say this strongly so that it sinks in. Grinding is for amateurs who don't understand strategy. And I'm willing to bet that if you use the strategy that we're going to lay out here in this talk for productivity and deep work, you will be able to get more done in 4 to 6 hours a day than most entrepreneurs get done working 10 to 12 hours a day. Now, I know that sounds a bit crazy, but I've been refining this deep work system over the past 15 years in business. I've used it to generate 8 figures in revenue, usually working about 4.5 hours a day, often a lot less than that, frankly, because I was like a young mid-20s entrepreneur traveling the world doing dumb shit most of the time. But I also got a lot done during that period of time, working a lot less than most people think you need to. And I've given this system to entrepreneurs who've scaled to 6, 7, and 8 figures. The biggest one actually having generated over $60 million in revenue as of today, while working, again, 4 to 6 hours a day. So I'm willing to bet, actually, that you're a lot like these entrepreneurs in the sense that you're willing to work as hard as you need to make your business successful. Of course, you're willing to put in 10 to 12 hours a day if that's actually going to produce the result. But if you tried that, you might feel a little bit terrible about yourself because you realize that half of that day is spent like kind of mindlessly clicking around in this distracted state, working on way too many things at once. And at the end of the day, you go home, or if you're working at home, you crawl into bed exhausted and sort of fed up with the lack of progress that you're making for all of that work that you're putting in. When you look at the tangible progress on the key tasks that actually push the business forwards, those feel like they're taking 2 or 3 times longer than they actually should. And so if you're anything like the entrepreneurs that I've coached over the years, you might have even fallen into this cycle where you're intensively grinding for a period of time, only to then fall off into this sort of numbed out, tired, distracted state where you can't get anything going. And so I know that feels like shit. It feels fucking terrible. And if you've experienced that, you might feel like something's wrong with you when Hormozy yells at you to work 12 hours a day on social media. But I'm here to tell you there just isn't, okay? It's just the wrong strategy. And I think the reason there's so much confusion about this in the market is because we've confused the difference between mechanical work and intellectual work, okay? Mechanical work is repeated tasks that you can kind of brute force all day long with very little drop in performance. So think like bagging groceries, working on an assembly line, even cold calling to a degree. You can kind of do those things all day long and just like gut it out if you need to with, again, very little drop in performance. But intellectual work has limits that mechanical effort simply doesn't. So in the intellectual domain, things like writing, crafting content, formulating big picture ideas, strategy, even something like sales calls to a degree, stuff that you do as a founder, that has limits. And those limits are not 12 hours a day. I'm sorry. So the analogy that I'd like to use is the difference between the employee, the worker on the assembly line, and the entrepreneur who created the assembly line, who actually thought that thing up. Those are 2 very different jobs. One of them is just repeated mechanical effort, kind of do it all day long, fatigue be damned. The other one, you just can't brute force. That's a creative process. And as a creative entrepreneur who makes their living with their mind, you need a better strategy. So the frame that I like to use for this is business as a mental sport. Okay. You are, in a sense, a cognitive athlete. So think about how pro athletes train. At the highest level, absolutely none of them are in the gym grinding through drills and exercises all day long for 12 hours a day. Fucking none of them are doing that. What they are doing is these focused, intense bouts of hard training for as long as they can until their performance drops below a quality threshold. And then they separate, they rest, they recover, they come back and hit it again. Okay. That's what they're doing. And so as a cognitive athlete, again, who makes their living with their mind, our job as entrepreneurs is to do the maximum amount of high quality work that we can do before performance drops below a threshold for quality that we can't sustain, and then to separate, rest, recover, come back and hit it again. So it's not about either being lazy or grinding all day. Those aren't the only two options. We can use a better strategy. And so the question becomes, how much focused, high quality work can we actually do as cognitive athletes? And turns out I tracked this. So many, many years ago, I started my first business, an online basketball training platform called Elite Guard Training. And this was the very, very early stages where I was just thinking about this business and starting to build it up. Was in late 2009, and then I launched it in August of 2010. So during that phase, I was living in the basement of a student house with my mattress on the floor right beside my desk so I could roll out of bed in the morning, roll into my chair and start working and work all day long. I'd take, short breaks for food, once in a while work out, but essentially I was grinding all day long. And inevitably, I found myself like eyes bleeding at the laptop at the end of every day, just squeezing every last drop out of myself. At the end of the day, like mindlessly clicking around, knowing that I wasn't really doing anything, but feeling like I needed to do more when my mind is moving through the mud and it's just a terrible way to work. And at the end of 9 months, our product launch went off. It went amazing. And so I had a bit of breathing room. And I realized how run down, how exhausted I was, how, frankly, low my performance was relative to when I was fresh. And so I just realized this is not sustainable. There's no way that I can keep this up at a high level. So when I got back to work, I took out a journal and I tracked hour by hour the tasks that I did and my perceived quality of the work that I was doing. And at the end of a week of tracking this, I realized that every single day, around 4 to 6 hours, my performance would begin to drop in a meaningful way where the quality of work was not worth doing. Okay. Now, that was a fucking paradigm shift at the time. I was like, okay, 4 to 6 hours, that doesn't seem like enough. I thought I had to work all day long. Why is nobody else doing this? And then I actually looked into it. And it turns out if you study the work habits and the lives of the most prolific creatives in history, think about Stephen King, for example. He has a book called On Writing, where he talks about working, or in his case, writing, for 3 to 4 hours a day every morning. And then in the afternoon, he answers emails, takes meetings, calls, whatever, and that's it. So he's doing 3 to 4 hours of really focused, deep work on his central craft. And the result is he's one of the most successful writers in history, published over 60 novels, I believe, at this point. Tim Ferriss, same way. He's written about this many, many times. 3 to 4 hours of deep work in the morning. In his case, I believe writing, but podcasting, etc. And then administrative work in the afternoon, and that's it. Naval has talked about this. Rick Rubin has talked about this. Look into the lives of the most prolific creators, and they all follow this very similar formula, okay? It's about 4 to 6 hours in total of work per day, and around 4 hours or so, they stop their deep work for the day. So this has proven true with, in my case, every single entrepreneur that I've ever worked with. Okay. Every single one. I know there's exceptions to the rule. Hormozi talks about working 12 hours a day. I don't know. I can't speak for him. Okay. I know there's 1% out there who can do probably a lot more, but in every fucking case I've ever seen, most entrepreneurs get more done in 4 to 6 hours of really high quality work done per day than if they grind it all day long. So the system I came up with for myself that, again, I've been refining and tweaking for about 15 years now. This has generated millions of dollars in sales. I used it to launch over 100 digital and physical products, multiple businesses. It works, all right? If you just simply repeat this day after day over the long term, you will consistently move towards your goal, guaranteed. You can't help but do it. So the system I use is a 3-block system where I do 2 deep work blocks per day and 1 of what I call shallow work blocks per day. So these blocks of time, I sit down with my timer. I put my phone on airplane mode. I'm not distracted clicking around on social media. I'm not checking email. I'm just doing the most important task and nothing else for the entire period of time. The period of time that I set for myself is 90 minutes, sometimes 120 minutes. So an hour and a half to 2 hours for each of these work blocks. At the end of the work block, and again, I can't say this strongly enough, full focus during that work block, not distracted, just working on the critical task. At the end of that work block, the timer goes off. I bring things to a good closing point, a natural stopping point, and then I fully separate. I'm not like kind of working on my phone. I'm not checking YouTube. I'm not clicking around social media. I rest my mind. And then after a period of time, I come back, I do another deep work block, 90 to 120 minutes, full focus on the most important task. And then again, timer goes off, separate, rest, recover, come back, one more usually in the afternoon, 90 to 120 minutes of administrative stuff. So answering emails, checking in on customers, taking calls, meetings, etc. Okay. So it follows that similar pattern. There's 2 really intensely focused blocks of deep work on the most important task, and then administrative stuff in the afternoon, and that's it. Now, I know that if I follow that system day in and day out, not for just like a day, again, anybody can work 16 hours in one day. Business is a long game. You have to repeat it over years and decades. And so I know that if I do this over years and decades, and I put 2 focused deep work blocks in every single day, I am moving the critical projects in my business forwards, and I cannot help but be successful over the long term. It's just a time game at that point. And I'm doing it in a way that keeps creativity fresh, that keeps ideas flowing, that keeps me feeling, performing at the highest level. It's something I can do continuously over the long period. So how this looks for me personally in my daily schedule is I will wake up usually without an alarm. I'll take a cold shower, I'll meditate, and then I'll make coffee, come down here and work, again, 90 to 120 minutes, unbroken focus on the most critical task. Timer goes off, I separate, I do like a protein shake smoothie, I go for a walk. I'm not using my mind during that time, so I'm not reading, I'm not listening to podcasts, audiobooks, I'm not checking social media, I'm just resting. That's critical, as we'll get into in a moment. And then I come back, one more deep work block. After that, I work out, eat lunch, take a nap, come back, afternoon, 90 to 120 minutes of administrative work. If I don't have calls on the schedule for that day, if I don't have too much admin stuff to do that day, then I'll just keep on going on whatever my key project is. And that's it. Okay. At the end of the day, timer goes off, separate, rest, recover. I meditate sometimes, like Epsom salt bath or a sauna, cold shower, stuff like that, recovery work. And then dinner, watch a show, hang out, see friends, go to sleep. That's it. That's my day. And so I have this very kind of holistic day where recovery is built in. I have reload periods in between the blocks of work. And then I have really intensely focused, deep work every single day. Now, what I also do is I only do that 5 or 6 days per week. That really shocks a lot of young entrepreneurs who have been conditioned to think that we have to work every single day. But I'll tell you a quick story about this. So there's a really famous program called Strategic Coach. Probably every entrepreneur that you follow has been through this program. It was created by Dan Sullivan over, I think it's decades old at this point. And there's 7, 8, even 9-figure entrepreneurs in this program. I did that program in 2018. We meet quarterly, so like once every 3-4 months. And the first meeting of Strategic Coach, the first thing they told us, which was something I was not doing, is that you have to take at least 1, preferably 2, of what they called free days every single week. A free day is basically you can do anything you want, but you can't work. You have to get full separation from your work. And the reasoning for this is because the cognitive and energetic reload that you get from taking a full day off per week or even 2 full days off per week will actually yield more long-term result than if you'd filled that 1 or 2 days with more work. That has proven so fucking true in my life. I cannot tell you. What inevitably happens on those free days, for me personally, it usually is something like Monday morning through Saturday at noon. So I do about 5.5 days of work, and then I take Saturday afternoon and Sunday off. What inevitably happens during that free day and a half is I will get my best ideas, my best creativity. I'll end up taking so many notes in my phone. It's as though I'm working all day while I'm resting. And neuroscience has an explanation for this. It's called the default mode network. It's basically our brain's like rest and digest system. You can imagine if you were eating all day long, you never give your body a chance to digest and assimilate the nutrients from that food. Our mind is the same way. So if you're using your mind all day long and there's no rest and digest, no default mode network activation, you are not connecting the dots and assimilating all of the information and knowledge that you are putting through your head. So during these free days, I get so much inspiration and creativity that they're some of the most productive days of my week often. Okay. So that's it. 3 blocks of work, 190 to 120 minutes per day. That's 4.5 to 6 hours a day of total work. 3 blocks of work, 2 deep work blocks, 1 shallow work block. In my case, 5.5 days a week. You can do 6 days a week if you want. And I do that year after year, decade after decade, now going on 15 years. It fucking works. Okay. There's a few things that make this, work, however, okay? And it doesn't work without these, because if you approach this 3 block system the same way that you would probably approach a 12-hour workday, it won't work. The first principle, and I know I've said this several times, but I'm going to say it again because it's important, it's critical. Full focus. When you sit down to work, the timer goes on, your phone goes on airplane mode, and you do nothing but the most important task, the critical task that you know is going to move your business forwards. That's it. If you think of a beam of light, okay, a really hyper concentrated beam of light, in other words, a laser, can cut through steel. It's fully concentrated. So all of its energy is cutting through this point. If you scatter that light so that it's kind of diffuse all over the place, it can't even warm up a piece of paper. So your mind, you want again, to use a corny analogy, like a laser on your work. You want all of your focus on the most important thing. That's the only way this is going to work. And if you do that, you actually can't sustain 12 hours a day. You'll find that out really fast. The proof is just simply try it. You won't be able to do it most likely. Second principle, strategic rest periods. So as I said, during the rest phases where you're stepping away from work and you're recovering, you're using your body, not your mind. Okay, that's the principle. So in the gym, if you're doing, let's say, a set of bench press, you wouldn't then, during your rest period, do a set of dumbbell bench press because it's working the same muscle. So the same way at work, when you're working your mind during these deep work blocks and even your shallow work block, when you then rest, you don't want to be reading, listening to podcasts, scrolling social media, watching YouTube. You want to actually rest. Allow the default mode network to kick in, to digest everything that you just did, so that you can then come back and hit that second deep work block or even the shallow work block in the afternoon even harder. All right. Third, again, I'm going to repeat this very briefly, but free days. I'm repeating it because this is the one that so many entrepreneurs fail to do. I personally need to discipline myself to do this. It's harder to stop working than it is to work. For me personally, you might be similar. So free days, again, 1 or even 2 completely free days where you can do anything you want, but you can't work. All right. Preferably don't go out on a bender. Like that's going to hurt your work quality too. But we're talking like healthy rest. All right. Exercise, go for walks, eat good food, hang out with friends, whatever, but separate. All right. If you do these 3 things, you follow, 4 things I'll say. You follow the 3 block system with full focus, strategic rest periods, and taking free days. You can't help but be successful as long as you're working on the right things. And that's a deep rabbit hole that we could fall down. I'm not going to address this in this talk. Let me know if you want to go into that, how to actually choose the right projects to focus on, because again, big topic. But as long as you're doing that, It's just a matter of time. All right. It's just a matter of time. So before we wrap up here, I'll address the big question that I know will come up. What if I have to do more? What if I'm in this real grind? I just have no choice but to grind. I'm in a startup phase. I am doing a product launch, whatever. I totally understand that. Okay. But the first question I would ask you is, what are you actually doing? What are you actually doing? Most entrepreneurs in these grind phases, and I'm not immune to this, okay? This happens to me as well, do way too much. We feel like we have to do so many different things when in reality, the big levers in the business are only a few things, okay? So when I first started my business, we were doing product launches. We had a huge library of products. I was creating new offers every few months. We were doing VSLs and long form sales pages. I was writing daily emails. Fuck else we were doing. We were doing SEO. We were blogging, if you can believe that. This is back in the day. We were messing around with Facebook ads. There were so many things going on. And I ended up actually, I was about to bring in a business partner to handle some of this workload, which would have been a terrible mistake. And so I did a coaching call with a coach of mine. And he was like, dude, okay, list everything that you're doing. All right. List everything that you're doing so that we can see it in plain sight. Then he goes, all right, now we're going to cross everything off this list that you don't need to do. By the time we were finished, we had the entire business simplified down to run an ad, to an email opt-in page, send a daily email, to sell, at the time, our signature offer, which was Elite Guard training, the basketball training program. That was the whole business. So run an ad, to an opt-in page, send a daily email, to an offer. Entire thing. This thing did multiple 7 figures a year for close to a decade with essentially that model. Okay. So the question is, if you feel like you have to do more, do you actually, or are you really just chasing a whole bunch of shit that you feel like you need to do that's not actually moving the needle? That's the first question, because your work will expand to fill the time that you allow it. If you actually sit in the chair for 12 hours a day, you are going to find things to do for 12 hours a day. You are going to inevitably be doing a whole bunch of stuff that you shouldn't be doing, or at least that won't appreciably move the business forwards. So that's the first question. What are you actually doing, and what do you actually need to be doing? Can you get it done in 4 to 6 hours? If you can't, and I totally understand there's just periods of time where you got to go harder. If that's the case, my advice is don't sacrifice the essentials. So don't sacrifice sleep. Don't sacrifice eating. Don't sacrifice exercise. Keep on doing all those things, because those are going to keep the quality of your work high and the freshness of your thinking high. All you do is you add a block. That's it. Just add another block. Okay. So maybe that means you do 2 deep work blocks in the morning, and then you do another deep work block in the afternoon, followed by a shallow work block at the end. Maybe it means you do 3 in the morning and then 1 in the afternoon, which is typically what works for me. I just work better in the morning, but your mileage may vary. It can be however you like. If you really, really, really need to do more, you can add 2 blocks, but you've really got to be strategic with your energy. Track your energy. Notice when your performance is dropping and you're just sitting there kind of mindlessly doing way too much. Notice that, okay? But in most cases, in almost every case that I've experienced, just adding 1 more block is going to do it, okay? So my big challenge to you, as we wrap up this talk, is to try it, okay? Try it. Before you assume that you need to do more, try the 3-block system and see, all right? Identify the most important tasks in your business. If you removed everything else and you just did those things, again, in my case, it was run ads to an email opt-in page, send a daily email to our offer. If you removed everything else, what tasks would guarantee success? Okay. Focus all 3 blocks on those most important tasks and do that for 30 days. And then see, how do you feel? Where's your energy at? What's the quality of your work like? See for yourself. I would bet heavy money, you won't go back to the old way. You'll be working this way for a long time. And, in my case, it's been 15 years now. So I'll wrap this up, but with a reminder, I suppose, that the goal of our work is not activity, it's productivity. In other words, how much did you actually produce for the work that you put in? Ass in chair hours don't count. They don't count. So, how much did you really produce at the end of the day? What tangible progress did you make that pushed your business forwards? And how can you repeat that over long periods of time? Again, years and decades. Masters of their craft did not become masters because they could grind the most in any given day. They became masters because they sharpened their craft day after day for decades. So take that approach to your work. And I would bet you it's going to work out a lot better. Okay. I hope this helped. Try that out. Let me know how you do, and we'll see you in the next one. Hey, it's Taylor. I hope you enjoyed today's talk. And if you did, here's the best place to go deeper right now. So my favorite part of the work that I do here is an email newsletter I write about the deeper game of entrepreneurship. We talk about scaling strategies, founder psychology, life strategy, and overall business as a path of self-mastery. I've generated 8 figures in revenue primarily through email over the past 15 years, and I'm willing to bet this will be unlike any other newsletter that you read. So if you want to check it out, hit the link in the description, and I hope to see you over there.